Good day, one and all. I'm Ted, your host, and welcome back to my channel. A channel where we'll explore all things that go bump in the night. So let's get right into our first story, shall we? This one's from someone that when they and their sibling were younger, they had a shared experience which neither will ever forget. The first time I saw an apparition. When I was younger, I lived in a house that is split into an upstairs and a downstairs apartment. My grandma, who was the landlord, lived in the upstairs apartment while my parents, two sisters, and I lived in the downstairs one. We moved out when I was in the third grade. While we lived there, we had a lot of paranormal experiences. And there was this one that I will never forget. My older sister, who was 6 at the time, and me, I was only 5, were playing games in the middle of the night. We liked to pretend that we were spies while everyone else was sleeping. We were in the living room, and we both were looking into the dining room, and we saw this little girl wearing a white nightgown. It looked like it could have been from the early 1900s. She had long brown hair and was very pale, and had sort of a glow around her. And she was just sitting under the dining room table staring at us. We both were immediately terrified and ran to our parents' room and stayed there the rest of the night. Now, I'm 21, my sister's 22, and we both still remember exactly what she looked like and how it felt seeing her. My family and I have so many crazy stories about that house, but I can't find any history on it. In about a year or so, I'll be moving back into that apartment on my own, and I'm so nervous about that. Well, maybe she just wanted to play herself. I mean, you guys were playing spy. Can you think of anyone that would make a better spy than a ghost? Next up, we have one from someone that had their workday interrupted by a ghost. It's called My Story. Now, I've never publicly shared my most vivid paranormal experience, but here goes nothing. I was 18 during the summer of 2005, and I worked 2 summers in a few of the buildings that were at the edge of an active mental institution. The main building was now converted offices, and at one time they were cells. You could tell because you could still see the marks of where the pen was on the wall. And that's only relevant to let you know what the state of the building was in. Anyway, halfway through the second summer, I was in the smaller side building, tasked with painting and doing some of the cleanup, all alone. Now I'm close to wrapping up for the day, moving out old chairs, when at the end of the hallway, I see a pale man walking across the open double doorway. He had long, stringy hair and was dressed all in rags. And he was absolutely translucent. There was 4 exits to the building, and 3 of which was behind me. The one at the end of the hallway led to a high security area. It was fenced in, had razor wire, and there was only 2 keys, one of which was in my pocket. The man had walked from the 4th door across the open hallway and into a pitch black double room to the right. In this room, there was no functioning lights. I called out, "Hello?" in my most authoritative voice I could manage, but there was no response. Then I heard some shuffling in the back room. I had to check the door, and it was the longest walk of my life. The door, of course, was locked, so I took my flashlight and I went into the back rooms, but there was nothing there either. From that point, I walked straight out of there and drove back to my boss, who was at the main building. I, of course, expected him to laugh at me, but he didn't. He just nodded his head solemnly and told me it had happened to plenty of people there. I had heard stories over the 2 summers, but eventually the place became, well, comfortable. They were, after all, just stories. But I never went into that building alone again. I always seemed to have a heavy feeling around me afterwards. Well, that is pretty freaky, all right. But you know what? Maybe you're just supervising your work. You know, make sure you didn't miss a spot. This one's from a woman who, while her and her husband were on vacation, they both saw something that neither one can explain. Shadow figures at MGM Las Vegas. Hi everyone. I've never posted anything like this before, but I've been thinking about it for a long time, and I'm curious if anyone else has experienced anything similar at Nomad Las Vegas, inside the MGM Park, which used to be the Monte Carlo. My husband and I stayed there in May 2022. We arrived on May 5th and stayed for the entire week. And we got upgraded to a suite in the Nomad section. And the suite had a roll-top bathtub in the bedroom area. One day, my husband went downstairs and I was alone in the suite. I decided to have a bath. The bathtub had a large chrome push plug in the bottom, the type that you push to seal it, then push it again to open. It was very effective, almost like a small mirror. And it was positioned centrally at the bottom of the bathtub. When I was in the bath, the lights were on, so it wasn't low lighting. When I finished, I leaned forward and pushed the plug to drain the water. As the water started draining and became more shallow, I looked down towards the chrome plug. It was basically between my legs, and I could see my reflection in it. But I could also see something behind me. It looked like a black shadow or a silhouette over my shoulder. It wasn't detailed like a person, more like a mass. Large, dark. It didn't reach the ceiling, but it looked tall and close, like it was standing right behind me. I froze and stared at the reflection, then turned and looked behind me. There was nothing there, just a plain, light-colored wall. No doorway, no corner, no object that could cast a shadow in that position. I looked back at the plug, and the black silhouette was still there behind behind my shoulder. I panicked and tried to find a logical explanation. There was a small round table next to the bath with a Tiffany bag on it. The classic Tiffany green colored bag. I thought maybe that's what I was seeing. But the table and bag were too low to appear in the plug's reflection. They weren't visible at all. I looked again, nothing. I looked down again, and it was gone. I got out of the bath so fast I nearly slipped, dried myself off real quick, and basically just jumped into bed to wait for my husband to come back, because I didn't want to be alone in that suite anymore. The other strange part is, throughout our stay, especially in low light, I kept feeling like I could see people moving around, like silhouettes walking through the suite. Multiple people. Now, I didn't tell my husband because I didn't want to sound stupid. But a day or two later, I finally told him what happened. He went quiet. And then he said he hadn't told me because he didn't want to scare me. But one night, while I was asleep, he was laying in bed and he could see through the double doors in the living area. He said in the dark he could see people walking around. Not one person, more than one. He said he watched them moving like they belonged there, and he didn't say anything because he didn't want to frighten me. So both of us had separate experiences in the same suite without talking about it first. So, has anyone else experienced anything strange at Nomad? Or even back when it was the Monte Carlo? I'm not saying this was paranormal, but on the other hand, I can't really explain it either. Well, I hope these shadow people at least kept their paws off the minibar. That's just expensive. This one's from a dude that was visiting a old abandoned children's hospital when he actually saw a ghost. Now you may think that would be the end of the story, but no, it was actually only the beginning. This story is called I Think Something Followed Me Home. Now, I visited Forest Haven in Maryland many times. I never saw anything that was particularly noteworthy. That was until my last visit, which was about 10 months ago, back in March. I was in one of the back buildings, walking down this long hallway, with cells or what could have been padded rooms at some point. I had turned around at the end of the hallway and saw at the halfway point a shadowy apparition of sorts peeking at me from one of the rooms. Whatever it was I saw felt sad, and looking back on it, I feel it could have been a child. I know no one was in these rooms because I had checked all the rooms in case of squatters, and I had repeatedly looked back while walking down the hallway. I get goosebumps and a swell in my throat whenever I talk about it to this day. Whatever it was scared the absolute crap out of me, to the point that when I saw it, I made an almost gasping, yelping noise and totally freaked out my girlfriend and her friends. But I couldn't say what I saw until we stepped outside. I explained what I saw when we finally got outside, and they all wanted to go back in, which I begrudgingly agreed to. But once we set foot back in there, I started to hear footsteps. And I said, hell with this. And I decided it was time for us to leave. There's been odd things that have happened at my house in the past, but nothing that stopped me in my tracks until after that experience. You know, growing up, I used to have things follow me home too. A stray cat, dog, even a raccoon once, but never a ghost. But you know what? Now that you mention it, I think I'm okay with that. One of the first things to start occurring, but has only happened once or twice, was the voices. Both me and my girlfriend had stepped into the house on separate occasions to the sound of voices. For my experience, I had walked in the front door and heard a male and female adult voice having a conversation. And as soon as I registered it was gone. I checked the whole house and there was nothing. My girlfriend, however, was downstairs changing and heard a male voice speaking upstairs. She just assumed it was my dad and asked me where he went when I got home an hour later. And I had told her that my dad had been at work the entire time. But she never heard anyone enter or leave the house. Secondly, was the little boy. This one is a little iffy for me because only my girlfriend saw him and she claims she had just woken up. Essentially, my girlfriend was laying in my bed in the morning. She rolled over, opened her eyes, and saw a little boy or something the size of a little boy in the doorway for a split second, and it disappeared. I chalked it up to being a half-asleep vision of sorts, which I've had before. The third experience, me and my girlfriend were downstairs where we usually reside, and it was very late at night. My dad's bedroom is directly above where we sit on our couch and watch TV. We were watching TV and kept hearing movements. So I paused the TV to listen and heard what sounded like furniture moving in my dad's room. He was asleep at the time and he had to be up at 5 a.m. for work. And what sounded like little footsteps going from the hallway to my brother's room. They were not home at the time. I never did ask my dad about this because I didn't want to sound crazy, but I know it wasn't him. And lastly, the reason why I'm writing this is because I think it may be getting aggressive or just more active. I had left for work around 4 a.m. and my girlfriend woke up to a plethora of noises 45 minutes after I had left. Something walked down the stairs, things on my shelf moving, something in the basement apparently sounded like a person moving clothes or changing. And then very loud bang on the wall, directly behind the bed. She described it as if someone ran full speed through my door and smacked into the wall next to her. None of the other stuff is super threatening, but that loud bang felt aggressive. Well, wait a second. Maybe the ghost wasn't being aggressive. Maybe he was just stupid. I mean, he figured that he could run real fast, but then he discovers way too late that he couldn't stop worth a damn. Now, we've been trying to ignore it because it only seems to ramp up when we acknowledge it or if we talk about it openly. I really just want to know what it is and whether or not it's safe, and if it's possible that it's multiple things on account of seeing a little boy but hearing adult male and female conversations multiple times. Can anyone give me any suggestions on how to safely identify this thing without causing more issues? Well, it's just sort of a pickle, isn't it? The problem is, when it comes to finding out solutions for your issue, it's kind of tough. I mean, you can look online and you will find, quote unquote solutions or what they claim could work. And in some cases, they might work. But more often than not, they'll either do nothing or could even make things worse. But you know something? You may have actually hit the nail on the head when you say that if you ignore it or don't talk about it, things seem to be quite a bit quieter. So maybe that's what you should do. It's like the old joke says. Guy goes into the doctor's office, says, "Doc, it hurts my shoulder when I do this." And the doctor says, "Then don't do this." Well, I think I've terrorized you enough for one night, so I think we'll call it quits right now. But please, if you have any comments about any of the stories we covered, or the channel in general, or perhaps have your own experiences that you, a friend, a family member may have had, that you'd like to see included in one of my videos, by all means, just let me know in the comments. But before you go, if you could be kind enough, if you haven't already, could you please hit like and subscribe and share this video? It does really help my channel out. And you may also want to turn on your notifications so that you'll be kept informed of any new videos we come out with. But I do want to thank you for coming. And remember, before you go to bed tonight, don't forget to check your closet and under your bed and pray that sound you heard was just in your head. Then grab your blankets and hold them extra tight. And beware of all things that go bump in the night.